Before we dive into this unbelievable Western story, imagine this for a moment. It's Christmas morning in the middle of the desert. A lonely cowboy steps outside, and his little daughter runs up to him saying, "Daddy, I brought you a present." But that present isn't a toy. It's a silent Apache widow walking toward their home, carrying a deadly warning that will change their lives forever. If you love mysterious frontier tales, make sure you subscribe, share this video with a friend, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Now hold tight, let's start this video. The sun crept over the desert horizon, its pale light stretching across the cracked ground like fingers searching for warmth. John Carver stepped out of his cabin, the old wooden boards creaking beneath his boots as the cold morning air bit at his skin. Christmas morning meant little out here. There were no carolers, no neighbors, no festive bells ringing across snow-covered streets, just the distant echo of wind brushing across barren land. He sighed heavily, rubbing his tired eyes. The loneliness of the frontier clung to him like a shadow he couldn't shake, no matter how hard he tried. Behind him, the soft sound of rapid footsteps interrupted the silence. Turning, he saw his 7-year-old daughter, Eliza, bundled in a coat far too big for her tiny frame. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and her boots kicked up dust as she ran toward him. "Daddy," she called, excitement bubbling in her voice. John tried to smile, but something weighed at his chest, something deeper than fatigue. "Ellie," he replied gently, "it's cold out here, you should be inside." But she shook her head with fierce determination. She clutched something behind her back, her small fingers gripping it tightly. "Daddy, I need to show you something," she insisted. John raised an eyebrow, expecting maybe a crude drawing or perhaps a rock she thought beautiful, but her eyes sparkled with a seriousness he wasn't used to seeing. "I brought you a present," she announced proudly, drawing herself up inches taller. "A Christmas present." John chuckled softly, playing along with her excitement, though Christmas had long since lost its magic for him. "A present, huh? And what did my little cowgirl bring me?" he asked. With a dramatic turn, Eliza pointed toward the ridge west of the cabin, the place where the desert dipped into a dry riverbed. "Hush," she said. John followed her finger, expecting perhaps a stray animal or maybe nothing at all, but his breath caught the instant he saw the figure approaching. A woman, silent, steady, wrapped in a woven Apache blanket, walked toward them with slow, deliberate steps. Her expression was unreadable, carved with loss and strength. John stiffened immediately. An Apache widow. On his land, alone, his pulse quickened, and instinctively he stepped in front of Eliza. The woman stopped a few yards away, her dark eyes observing him with calm intensity. Eliza tugged his sleeve innocently. "I found her by the river, Daddy. She looked sad. I talked to her. She didn't say much, but she followed me. I think she wants to give you something." John swallowed hard. Apache relations were fragile at best, dangerous at worst. A widow was sacred to her people, bound by spiritual rights settlers didn't dare interfere with. "Ellie," John said slowly, "you shouldn't talk to strangers out here." But Eliza frowned. "She's not a stranger, she's helping." John forced himself to straighten, keeping Eliza behind him. "Ma'am," he called carefully, keeping his tone neutral, "you're standing on private land. If you need help, we can talk, but we don't want trouble." The widow didn't flinch. Instead, she raised her chin with dignified composure. Then she spoke in slow, accented English. "Not trouble, debt." The single word cut through the air like a blade. John blinked, confused. "Debt," he repeated. The woman nodded once, drawing back her blanket just enough to reveal a bone-carved amulet hanging from her neck. John's stomach dropped instantly. He recognized the amulet, its shape, its markings, the rawhide cord, it all came rushing back. 2 winters ago, he had found a wounded Apache warrior barely clinging to life, bleeding under the merciless sun. John had no reason to help him. The tribe mistrusted settlers, and settlers feared the Apache. But he had lifted the man onto his back and carried him miles to the border of the tribal ground, leaving him where Apache healers could find him. They never spoke to John after that. No thanks, no acknowledgement, just silence. "Until now, my husband," the widow whispered, "you carried him home." Her voice wavered with grief, though her body remained still. "He died later, but he did not die alone because of you." John's jaw tightened. "I didn't expect anything in return," he murmured. The widow shook her head. "Apache pay debts, even death does not break this." Eliza peeked from behind her father, eyes wide. "Daddy, she came because she wants to help you," she said, but the widow raised a hand, pointing east. "Help from danger," she added. John tensed immediately. What danger? Her answer came with chilling simplicity. 4 riders, bad men, they hunt widows, they kill settlers, they come today. John stared at her, disbelief twisting his thoughts until the distant rumble of hooves broke through the stillness. His blood ran cold. Dust clouds formed on the horizon. The widow's warning was no superstition. It was real. He grabbed Eliza by the shoulders. Inside, now. She obeyed without question, sprinting to the cabin. John reached for his rifle, old and rusted but still functional. His hands shook as adrenaline surged through him. The widow stepped beside him. "Stay back," he hissed, but she shook her head firmly. "Apache det." Her tone left no room for argument. 4 riders approached with reckless confidence, their horses kicking up sand as they came to a stop near the cabin. Their leader, a tall man with a jagged scar slicing across his cheek, grinned as he saw the widow standing next to John. "Well, look at that," he sneered. "Cowboy carvers making new friends." John lifted the rifle slightly. "You're trespassing," he said, attempting to keep his voice steady. The scarred man shrugged. "Ain't here for you, we're here for her." He jerked his chin toward the widow. "Apache woman, worth money or fun, maybe both." John's grip tightened until his knuckles turned white. "She's under my protection," he said quietly. The men laughed, one spitting in the dirt. "Protection from you?" the leader mocked. "Move aside, cowboy, we don't want to kill you, not on Christmas." John took a single step forward, placing his boot firmly in the dust. "You take another step toward her," he said, voice low and trembling with fury, "and Christmas won't save you." The scarred man smirked. "Let's see you back that up." His hand moved toward his holster. And the widow whispered softly, "Stay behind me." The widow stepped forward with a calmness that chilled even the wind. Her eyes locked on the scarred rider, unblinking, unwavering, as if she had stared down death before and did not fear meeting it again. John instinctively reached for her arm, trying to pull her back, but she slipped free like smoke. She raised both hands slowly, palms outward, in a gesture that wasn't surrender, but warning. The scarred man frowned. "What's this, Apache magic?" he mocked. But John saw something shift in the air, a tension that vibrated like a plucked string. The scarred man jerked his chin at his partners. "Get her." 2 riders kicked their horses forward. Before John could react, the widow crouched swiftly and drew something from beneath her blanket, a short, carved throwing stick used by her people for hunting and protection. With a single fluid motion, she whipped her arm forward. The stick shot through the air and cracked against the first rider's wrist. His pistol flew from his hand as he yelled in pain, his horse rearing violently. Dust exploded around him as he tumbled to the ground. The second rider halted instinctively, startled by the precision. John raised his rifle, heart pounding. He wasn't a sharpshooter, not like the soldiers back east, but desperation could turn any man into a capable fighter. The second rider hesitated too long. John fired. The bullet didn't hit him, but it struck the saddle strap, sending the rider sliding sideways and nearly falling. The horse bolted, leaving the man scrambling in the dirt. The scarred leader snarled and reached for his gun, but the widow had already repositioned. Her hands moved with controlled fury, her stance steady as a rooted tree. "You don't listen," she said quietly, "so you blade instead." The scarred man fired, the bullet slicing the air. John dove behind a trough. The widow spun, the shot grazing her shoulder, but she didn't cry out. Instead, she rushed forward, faster than John expected, her blanket unfurling behind her like a crimson shadow. She struck the leader's gun hand with a swift chop, forcing him to drop the weapon. He lunged at her, but she sidestepped, driving her knee into his stomach with brutal efficiency. The third man, who had stayed mounted, finally regained his senses and aimed at her with shaky hands. John yelled, "No," and fired again, the shot striking the ground inches from the rider's horse. The frightened animal reared, throwing the man off balance. The widow seized the distraction. She swept the scarred leader's legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the ground. He groaned, reaching for a knife strapped to his boot. Eliza's terrified scream burst from inside the cabin. "Daddy!" John felt something primal ignite inside him. The scarred man lunged upward, brandishing the knife. John didn't think. He surged forward, swinging the rifle like a club. The wooden stock connected with the attacker's wrist with a sickening crack. The blade fell to the dirt. The man howled in pain. The widow seized the opportunity, grabbing his collar and slamming his head back into the sand. His body went limp. The remaining 2 men scrambled to their feet, one clutching his wrist, the other limping from the fall. They exchanged glances, then turned to their horses. Fear overtook whatever greed they'd arrived with. "This ain't worth it," one shouted. They mounted clumsily, kicking their horses into a panicked gallop. Within seconds, they were no more than specks fleeing into the desert. John stood heaving, rifle trembling in his grip. His chest burned with cold air and fear. He looked at the widow. Blood soaked her shoulder, but she remained upright, breathing slowly, grounding herself with the discipline of a warrior. "You're hurt," John said, rushing to her side. She shook her head gently. "I stand. Help your daughter first." Eliza burst out of the cabin and ran straight toward John, tears streaking her cheeks. He scooped her into his arms, holding her so tightly she squeaked. "Are you okay, Ellie?" he whispered. She nodded against his chest. "I was scared, Daddy." He kissed her forehead. "I know, but you're safe now." The widow watched them quietly, a small softness breaking through her stoic expression. John set Eliza down and walked to the widow, lifting his hands to examine her wound. "Let me tend this," he said, but she gently pushed his hand away. "Later. First, something more important." She motioned for him to follow her a few steps away from the cabin. There she knelt in the dirt and pressed her hand to the ground. John frowned, unsure what she was doing. She retrieved the bone amulet from around her neck and held it out to him. "This belongs to you now," she said. John's eyes widened. "I can't take that. It was your husband's." "Yes," she replied softly, "and he wanted it returned to the man who carried him home. He told me before he died. He said you saved his spirit, that you carried him like a brother." A tremor in her voice revealed the grief she carried like a permanent wound. "He said when the day came, I must repay the debt. Today was that day." John swallowed, humbled to silence. Slowly he closed her fingers back around the amulet. "Keep it," he said gently. "It's your memory of him." But she shook her head. "Memory lives here." She touched her heart, "not in bone." The wind blew softly across the valley, carrying the scent of cold sage and dust. Eliza walked over, slipping her small hand into the widow. "Thank you for saving my daddy," she said earnestly. The widow looked down at her, a rare warmth blooming in her eyes. "You saved him first," she replied, "by bringing me." John felt the truth of those words settle deep inside him, heavier than any rifle, sharper than any knife. If Eliza had not approached the widow that morning, everything could have ended differently. The weight of the moment struck him with profound clarity. The widow rose slowly, wincing slightly from her wound. John stepped forward. "You can't travel like that," he insisted. "Let me bandage it. At least rest and eat before you leave." She regarded him quietly for a long moment, then nodded once. A short rest. Inside the cabin, John cleaned the wound with the little supplies he had. Eliza brought the widow a bowl of warm stew and sat beside her, watching her with innocent fascination. The widow ate slowly, respectfully, as though performing a ritual instead of a simple meal. When she finished, she stood and wrapped her blanket around her shoulders again. "It's time," she said. John felt a tightness in his throat. "Where will you go?" She gazed toward the distant mountains. "Back to my people. They will know the danger is gone." She walked toward the door but paused and turned back to him. "You are not alone, John Carver. Your kindness travels farther than you know." Before he could respond, she stepped outside into the fading light. Her silhouette stretched across the sand, merging with the desert's quiet spirit. Eliza ran after her. "Will you come back?" she asked hopefully. The widow knelt and cupped the girl's cheek. "If the wind carries your call," she answered mysteriously. Then she rose and walked toward the horizon, her figure slowly swallowed by the vastness of the land. John stood in the doorway, Eliza clinging to his leg. The desert was silent again, but it no longer felt cold or empty. Something had shifted, something had healed. Eliza looked up at him with a soft smile. "Daddy," she whispered, "that was the best Christmas present ever." John exhaled deeply, placing his hand on her head. "Yes," he said quietly, watching the last glimpse of the widow disappear, "it truly was." And for the first time in years, the desert didn't feel like a place of loss. It felt like a place where debts were honored, spirits watched over the living, and even on the roughest frontier, Christmas miracles could still find their way home.